The Grand Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a wave of death rolling across the stars. 30 warships stretched across the void in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed with ancient power. Their weapons hummed with energy that could tear apart anything in their path. Commander Kethver stood on the bridge of the flagship and smiled at what he saw. Haven's Rest floated in the distance. 17 human vessels had gathered around it in a defensive formation. Cargo haulers, transport ships, mining vessels that had been hastily equipped with whatever weapons the humans could find. It was not a fleet. It was barely a speed bump. Kethver opened a communication channel and addressed the station. He did not offer terms. He did not ask for surrender. He simply told them that they were about to die and that their species would be erased from the sector as a lesson to others. Then he closed the channel and ordered the attack. Admiral Patricia Cole watched the Velthari fleet advance on her screens. Her shoulder still ached from the wound she had taken 3 weeks ago. She had not slept more than 4 hours in the past 2 days. She looked at the faces of her crew around her and saw fear and determination, mixed together in equal measure. She opened a channel to all human ships. Her voice was steady and calm. She told them that this was probably the end. She told them that the odds were against them and that survival was unlikely. Then she told them that she had never been more proud to serve alongside any group of people in her entire life. She told them that no matter what happened today, they had already won something the Velthari could never take away. They had proven that humans would not abandon each other. They had shown the galaxy what ordinary people could do when they stood together. She told them to make it count. The battle began with fire and fury. Velthari weapons tore through space and slammed into human ships. A transport vessel named Wandering Hope took 3 direct hits and broke apart within the first minute. A mining hauler named Red Canyon managed to ram a Velthari frigate before being destroyed. The crew had known they would not survive. They had done it anyway. Scott Bradley was a pilot who had spent his career flying cargo routes between colonies. He had never been in combat before today. His ship was a converted freighter with weapons that barely scratched Velthari shields. He watched 2 of his friends die in the opening moments of the battle and felt something break inside him. He pushed his ship to maximum speed and aimed directly at the nearest Velthari cruiser. His targeting computer locked onto the enemy vessel's engine section. He knew his weapons could not penetrate their shields. But his ship itself was another matter. He sent a final message to his sister on Earth. He told her that he loved her. Then he accelerated. The explosion tore through the cruiser's engines and sent it spinning out of control. Scott Bradley died instantly, but the cruiser crashed into 2 other Velthari vessels before it was destroyed. 3 enemy ships taken out by a cargo pilot who had never wanted to fight. On Haven's Rest, Grace Palmer coordinated communications between the human ships. She directed rescue operations for crews that had abandoned crippled vessels. She relayed targeting data and damage reports. She did everything she could to help while watching her people die on her screens. Danny Russo brought her coffee without being asked. He did not say anything. He just put the cup in her hand and went back to helping wherever he was needed. The bakery owner from Earth had become one of the most important people on the station simply because he never stopped trying to make things a little better for everyone around him. The battle raged for 2 hours. The humans were losing. They had always known they would lose. But they were making the Velthari pay for every inch of space. They were fighting with everything they had because that was who they were. Then something changed. New ships appeared on the sensors. Not human ships. Rithani vessels. Dozens of them. They emerged from faster-than-light travel and immediately began firing on the Velthari fleet. Kethver stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The Rithani had been loyal subjects for 8 centuries. They had never shown any sign of rebellion. This was impossible. More ships arrived. Morn Federation vessels with their distinctive triangular hulls. Silith freehold fighters swarming like angry insects. Species that had lived under Dominion rule for generations were rising up. They were fighting back. They were choosing to stand with the humans. Captain Salaith of the Rithani trading fleet sent a message to Haven's Rest. Her words were simple. She said that the humans had reminded her people what courage looked like. She said that the Rithani refused to be afraid anymore. She said that they stood with their new friends. The battle shifted. The Velthari were still the most powerful force in the sector, but they were suddenly outnumbered. Their fleet had been designed to crush human resistance, not fight a war on multiple fronts. Kethver ordered a tactical withdrawal to regroup. Commander Zethral had escaped confinement during the chaos of the fleet's departure. He had stolen a shuttle and followed the Grand Fleet to Haven's Rest. He arrived just in time to see his people retreating for the first time in recorded history. He opened a channel to Kethver and told him to stop. He told him that this war could not be won. He told him that the Dominion had made an enemy of the entire sector by attacking the humans. He told him that continuing to fight would only lead to more death on all sides. Kethver refused to listen. He ordered Zethral's shuttle destroyed. But before the weapons could fire, something remarkable happened. 3 Velthari captains switched their ship's targeting systems to defensive mode. They refused to fire on their greatest warrior. They refused to continue this war. The Grand Fleet fractured. Some ships followed Kethver in retreat. Others simply stopped fighting. A few turned and jumped to faster-than-light travel, fleeing to unknown destinations. The Dominion's military might, built over 12,000 years, crumbled in a single afternoon. 1 year later, Grace Palmer sat across from Commander Zethral at a table on a neutral station. They shared a meal of foods from both their cultures. They talked about the future. The Dominion was rebuilding itself as something new. The subject species were free. Humanity had been accepted into the galactic community. Zethral asked her a question that had been bothering him since the first day they met. He asked why humans were so willing to die for each other. He asked what made them different from every other species the Dominion had conquered. Grace thought about it for a long time. Then she said that she did not think humans were different. She said that every species had the capacity for courage and sacrifice and love. The Dominion had simply forgotten what those things looked like. They had been conquerors for so long that they had lost touch with what it meant to care about something other than power. She said that the humans had not taught the galaxy anything new. They had simply reminded everyone of something old, something important, something that had always been there. People were stronger together than they could ever be alone. Zethral nodded slowly. He understood now. The Velthari had sent their strongest warriors against the humans. None of them had returned the same, because the humans had shown them that true strength was not measured in weapons or armor or military victories. True strength was measured in how much you were willing to sacrifice for the people you loved. The Dominion had never stood a chance. The High Council chamber had not seen such chaos in 3,000 years. Council members shouted at each other across the ancient stone floor. Some demanded the complete destruction of every human settlement in the sector. Others called for caution and patience. A few whispered that perhaps they had made a terrible mistake. Over 1,000 Velthari warriors were dead. The finest soldiers the Dominion had ever produced had fallen to miners and civilians and teenage boys with fire extinguishers. The news had spread to every corner of the Empire. Subject species were asking questions. They were wondering if perhaps the Dominion was not as invincible as they had always believed. Commander Zethral stood before the council and waited for them to stop arguing. He had requested permission to address them, and they had granted it because they wanted answers. They wanted to understand how this had happened. They wanted someone to blame. When the chamber finally fell silent, Zithral spoke. His voice was calm and measured. He told them everything he had seen. He told them about Paul Hendricks charging to his death so others could escape. He told them about Linda Torres refusing to leave her patients. He told them about Kevin Marshall holding a junction point with nothing but determination and a broken pipe. He told them about Patricia Cole standing at her post with blood running down her arm and asking if anyone wanted coffee. The council members stared at him. They did not understand what he was trying to say. One of them demanded to know why these stories mattered. The humans had lost. The station was damaged. Their people were dead. Victory belonged to the Dominion. Zethral shook his head slowly. He said that they had not won anything. He said that they had taken a station, but they had not broken the humans. He said that you could not defeat an enemy who did not know how to surrender. He said that you could not crush a species that would rather die than abandon each other. An elderly council member rose from his seat. His name was High Chancellor Vorn, and he had ruled the Dominion for 200 years. He asked Zethral what he was suggesting. He asked if the greatest warrior in Velthari history was recommending retreat. Zethral was quiet for a long moment. Then he said that he was not suggesting retreat. He was suggesting something far more difficult. He was suggesting that the Dominion ask itself why it was fighting in the first place. He was suggesting that perhaps there were things more important than conquest and domination. He was suggesting that perhaps the humans had something to teach them. The chamber erupted again. Council members accused him of cowardice and weakness. They said he had been corrupted by the enemy. They said he was no longer fit to command. But Zethral did not defend himself. He simply waited for them to finish and then walked out of the chamber. Far away, the humans were preparing for what they believed would be the final battle. Grace Palmer had been working without sleep for 3 days. She had sent messages to every human colony in range. She had coordinated supply shipments and evacuation routes. She had done everything she could think of to give her people a chance. Admiral Patricia Cole had recovered from her wounds, but her arm would never be the same. She did not complain. She had too much work to do. The station's defenses were being rebuilt and expanded. Volunteers were being trained in basic combat. Danny Russo had organized a team of cooks to keep everyone fed. He said that an army marched on its stomach, and he was going to make sure nobody went hungry. But the most remarkable thing was happening beyond human space. The other species of the sector were watching. The Rithani had been subjects of the Dominion for 800 years. They had never fought back because they believed resistance was pointless. Now they were asking different questions. If humans could stand against the Velthari, what else was possible? A Rithani trading captain named Salaith made contact with Grace Palmer through back channels. She wanted to know if the stories were true. She wanted to know if humans had really fought the Dominion and survived. Grace told her everything. She did not exaggerate, and she did not hide the cost. She told Salaith about the dead and the wounded. She told her about the fear and the pain. And then she told her about the courage. Salaith listened to it all. When Grace finished speaking, the Rithani captain was quiet for a long time. Then she said that her people had forgotten what courage looked like. She said that the Dominion had taught them to be afraid for so long that they had forgotten how to be brave. She said that watching the humans had reminded them of something important. She said that the Rithani would not forget again. Similar conversations were happening across the sector. The Morn Federation sent a secret envoy to Haven's Rest. The Silith Freehold dispatched observers to watch and report. Species that had lived under Dominion rule for centuries were stirring. They were not ready to fight. Not yet. But they were ready to hope. A woman named Beth Crawford became famous without intending to. During the battle for Haven's Rest, she had carried 3 wounded children through enemy fire to reach the medical bay. She had been shot twice and had kept going. When asked about it later, she said that she had not been brave. She said that she had simply refused to let those kids die alone in a corridor. The humans did not call themselves heroes. They did not think of themselves as warriors or soldiers. They were just people trying to protect each other. They were teachers and farmers and bakers and doctors. They were parents and children and friends and strangers who had become family in the face of extinction. The Dominion High Council voted for total war. They assembled the Grand Fleet, 10,000 warriors, 30 warships, enough firepower to shatter planets and boil oceans. They were done playing games. They were done underestimating the enemy. They would destroy Haven's Rest and every human in the sector, and then they would forget that any of this had ever happened. Commander Zethral was stripped of his command and placed under guard. The council considered him compromised and potentially dangerous. They appointed a new commander named Kethver, who had never lost a battle and never shown mercy. He was exactly what they wanted. The Grand Fleet departed for human space. The end was coming. And yet, somehow, impossibly, the humans were not afraid. Patricia Cole called a meeting of everyone on the station. She told them what was approaching. She told them that they were outgunned and outmatched, and that victory was almost certainly impossible. Then she asked if anyone wanted to leave. Nobody moved. Patricia smiled and said that she was proud to serve with them. Then she told them to get back to work. They had a battle to prepare for. Word spread across human space like fire through dry grass. The story of Kepler 7b traveled from station to station and world to world. People spoke of miners who had stood against the most feared warriors in the galaxy. They spoke of Paul Hendricks and his final charge. They spoke of Linda Torres and her clinic that never closed. They spoke of ordinary people who had refused to abandon each other. The Valkyrie Dominion did not understand why humans were not terrified. The High Council had expected the attack to break human morale and send them fleeing from the sector. Instead, something unexpected was happening. Humans were arriving at Haven's Rest by the hundreds. Then by the thousands. They came on cargo ships and passenger vessels and converted freighters. They came from Earth and Mars and the colony worlds scattered across human territory. They were not soldiers. A man named Danny Russo arrived on a transport filled with food supplies. He had owned a bakery on Earth for 15 years. He had never been in a fight in his life. When asked why he had come, he said that he wanted to help however he could. Grace Palmer watched these people arrive and felt something she could not name. Pride, perhaps. Or maybe hope. She had spent her whole career believing that diplomacy could solve any problem. Now she was watching her species prepare for war, and she was not sure how to feel about it. Admiral Patricia Cole arrived 3 days after the attack on Kepler 7b. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had served in the human fleet for 40 years and had never lost a ship under her command. The Council of Earth had sent her to take charge of the defense of Haven's Rest. Patricia walked through the station and met with everyone she could find. She talked to the engineers and the doctors and the maintenance workers. She talked to Danny Russo and learned that he made excellent bread. She talked to the children and promised them that everything would be okay. She did not know if that was true, but she said it anyway because they needed to hear it. Commander Zethral requested reinforcements from the High Council. He told them that the humans were gathering forces and that a larger show of strength was needed. He did not tell them about his doubts. He did not tell them about the child with the fire extinguisher. He buried those thoughts deep inside and focused on the mission. 5 additional warships arrived carrying 2,000 Valkyrie warriors. The fleet now had enough firepower to destroy the entire station in minutes. Zethral sent a final message to the humans demanding their immediate surrender. He expected them to comply this time. Surely they could see that resistance was pointless. Patricia Cole sent back a reply. Her words were simple. She said that the people of Haven's Rest would not be leaving. She said that they had built lives here, and they intended to keep them. She said that she hoped the Velthari would reconsider their position. And then she said something that made Zethro pause. She said that she did not want to fight. She said that war was a waste, and that both sides would lose things they could never get back. She said that there was still time to find another way. Her voice was calm and her eyes were steady, and she reminded him of Grace Palmer in that moment. Zethro ended the transmission and ordered the attack. The Velthari fleet advanced on Haven's Rest from 3 directions. They expected the humans to scatter. Instead, the station's few defensive ships moved to intercept. 17 small vessels against 30 warships. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter waiting to happen. But the humans did not fight like they were supposed to. They did not try to destroy the Velthari ships. They threw themselves in front of weapons fire meant for the station. A cargo hauler named Morning Light took 6 direct hits protecting a civilian transport trying to evacuate children. The captain was a woman named Rachel Perry, and she kept her ship between the enemy and those kids until her engines finally gave out. Inside the station, Patricia Cole directed the defense from the command center. Velthari boarding parties breached the hull in 4 places. She sent teams to meet them, and then sent more teams when the first ones fell. She never raised her voice. She never showed fear. She simply did what needed to be done. A teenage boy named Kevin Marshall found himself alone at a junction point when his team was overrun. He had no weapon. He had only a fire extinguisher and a broken pipe he had pulled from the wall. 3 Velthari warriors approached his position. He knew he was going to die. He thought about running. Then he thought about the people behind him in the shelter bay, families, children, people who were counting on someone to protect them. Kevin activated the fire extinguisher and sprayed it directly into the face of the lead warrior. The chemical compound was not designed as a weapon, but it blinded the Velthari long enough for Kevin to swing his pipe at the second warrior's legs. He fought for 20 minutes. He was wounded 7 times. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found him still standing at his post. The 3 Velthari warriors were dead at his feet. Patricia Cole heard about Kevin on the communication channel. She smiled for the first time since the battle began. Then she went back to work. The fighting lasted 9 hours. The Velthari lost 600 warriors. They breached the command center just as their ground forces were reaching exhaustion. They expected to find the human commander dead or hiding. Instead, Patricia Cole was standing at her post with a plasma burn across her shoulder and blood running down her arm. She looked at the Velthari soldiers surrounding her and asked if they would like some coffee. She said it had been a long day for everyone. Commander Zethral entered the command center and stood before her. He had won. The station was his. The humans were defeated. But looking at this small, gray-haired woman who refused to sit down, even though she was clearly in pain, he felt nothing like victory. He asked her why she had not surrendered. He asked her why she had not evacuated when she had the chance. He asked her why she had stayed to fight a battle she could not win. Patricia Cole looked at him with tired eyes and gave him the simplest answer in the universe. She said that she did not leave her people behind. She said that was not who she was. She said that was not who humans were. Zethral ordered his forces to withdraw from the station. He told the High Council that the objective had been achieved. He told them that human resistance had been broken. He lied again, and as his ships pulled away from Haven's Rest, he watched the humans begin repairing their station. Already they were helping each other. Already they were rebuilding. They had lost hundreds of their own, and they were not stopping. They were not giving up. He had sent his strongest against them. None of them had returned unchanged. The mining settlement on Kepler 7b was not much to look at. a collection of metal buildings huddled together on a barren gray moon. The miners worked deep beneath the surface, extracting rare minerals that powered human technology. They were simple people doing hard work. They had families. They had hopes and dreams. They had never asked for war. Commander Zethra landed his forces at dawn. 300 Velthari warriors in full battle armor descended upon the settlement like a storm of death. Their weapons hummed with lethal energy. Their boots crushed the rocky ground beneath them. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything they could not kill. The first building they approached was a residential block. Zethral ordered his warriors to breach the doors and secure everyone inside. He expected screaming. He expected people cowering in corners and begging for their lives. He expected this to be over within the hour. The doors exploded outward before his warriors could touch them. 3 Velthari soldiers were thrown backward by the blast. A man stood in the doorway, holding a mining detonator in his hands. His name was Paul Hendricks, and he had worked in construction for 20 years before becoming a foreman at this settlement. He had never held a weapon in his life until this morning. Paul shouted something to the people behind him, and then charged directly at the nearest Velthari warrior. He was killed almost instantly. But in the 3 seconds it took for him to die, the other miners escaped through a back tunnel he had helped dig 6 months ago for exactly this purpose. Zethral stared at the dead human on the ground. The man had known he could not win. He had known he was going to die. And yet he had attacked anyway. Not to save himself. To give others a chance to escape. It made no tactical sense. It made no logical sense. And yet, it had worked. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Velthari had ever experienced. The miners did not fight like soldiers. They fought like people who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. They used drilling lasers meant for cutting rock to cut through Velthari armor. They collapsed tunnels on advancing warriors. They created makeshift bombs from mining explosives and left them in corridors and stairwells. A cause. Woman named Linda Torres ran the settlement's medical clinic. When the attack began, everyone told her to flee with the others. She refused. She set up an emergency station in the central hub and began treating the wounded as they arrived. Velthari warriors breached her clinic twice. Both times she stood her ground, and both times other miners appeared to drive them back. She saved 19 lives that day. She never picked up a weapon. She never stopped working. Zethral pushed deeper into the settlement with his personal guard. He was furious now. These primitive creatures were making fools of his warriors. 47 Velthari had already fallen. 47 of the finest soldiers the Dominion had ever produced, killed by miners and laborers and ordinary people with no training. He found a group of humans, barricaded in the main processing center. They had overturned heavy machinery to create barriers and were using whatever they could find as weapons. An old man threw a wrench that bounced off Zethral's helmet. A young woman fired a welding torch at his legs. A child, no more than 10 years old, stood behind the adults with a fire extinguisher clutched in her small hands. Zethral could have killed them all. His weapon was raised. His finger was on the trigger. But something stopped him. He looked at the child and saw no fear in her eyes. She was terrified, yes. Her hands were shaking and tears were running down her face. But she was not running. She was standing with her people, ready to fight with nothing but a fire extinguisher against warriors who had conquered worlds. He lowered his weapon. He did not understand why. He turned and walked away and ordered his forces to regroup outside the settlement. His second-in-command questioned this decision. Zethral struck him across the face and told him to be silent. He had no explanation for what he had done. He had no words for the feeling growing inside his chest. He only knew that something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of the universe. The Volturi withdrew from Kepler 7b. They had inflicted casualties on the humans. They had destroyed buildings and equipment. By any objective measure, they had won the engagement. But Zethral knew the truth. They had lost something far more important than soldiers. They had lost the certainty that had defined the Dominion for 12,000 years. Back aboard the burning Eclipse, Zethral sat alone in his quarters and stared at the wall. He thought about Paul Hendricks charging to his death so others could live. He thought about Linda Torres refusing to abandon her patients. He thought about that little girl with the fire extinguisher who would not run. These humans were not warriors. They were not soldiers. They were farmers and miners and doctors and children. And yet they had fought with a ferocity that his own elite forces could not match. Not because they were strong, because they cared about each other more than they cared about themselves. Zethral had killed thousands of enemies in his long career. He had crushed rebellions and ended wars. He had never once felt doubt about what he was doing. War was simple. The strong dominated the weak. That was the natural order. That was the way things had always been. But these humans did not follow the natural order. They did not behave like any species he had encountered. They did not surrender when outmatched. They did not flee when death was certain. They stood together and fought for each other with everything they had. He sent his report to the High Council. He told them that the settlement had been neutralized. He told them that human resistance had been minimal. He lied. For the first time in his life, Commander Zethral lied to his superiors. He was not ready to tell them the truth. He was not ready to admit that he had seen something on that moon that frightened him more than any enemy he had ever faced. He was not ready to say that these fragile creatures with their short lives and their soft bodies might be more dangerous than the Dominion had ever imagined. But deep inside, he knew. The war was just beginning, and the Volturi were not prepared for what was coming. The Volturi Dominion had ruled the Orion sector for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 900 worlds, and their warriors were feared by every species that had ever encountered them. They were tall creatures with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed with cold blue light. They did not know defeat. They did not understand mercy. And they certainly did not concern themselves with the arrival of primitive newcomers to their territory. When the first human colony ships appeared at the edge of Volturi space, the High Council barely took notice. The reports described small vessels carrying soft creatures with fragile bodies and short lifespans. They had no shields worth mentioning. Their weapons were laughable. Their entire civilization was barely 3 centuries old in terms of space travel. The council members found the whole situation amusing. Commander Zethral stood before the High Council and requested the honor of dealing with these humans personally. He was the most decorated warrior in Volturi history. He had crushed rebellions on 40 worlds. He had ended wars with single battles. His name alone was enough to make entire species surrender without fighting. The council granted his request without hesitation. Zethral assembled his fleet with care. He chose 300 of the finest warriors the Dominion had ever produced. Each one had killed at least 100 enemies in combat. Each one wore armor forged from metals that human scientists had not yet discovered. They boarded the warship called Burning Eclipse and set course for the human border. The journey took 4 days. During that time, Zethral studied everything the Dominion knew about humans. He learned that they came from a planet called Earth. He learned that they breathed oxygen and required water to survive. He learned that their bodies were weak and their bones broke easily. He learned that they lived for less than a century. Everything he read confirmed what he already believed. These creatures were beneath his concern. The burning Eclipse arrived at a human station called Haven's Rest. It was a modest structure floating in the darkness between stars. Perhaps 10,000 humans lived there. Zethro could see their small ships docked along the station's arms. None of them were military vessels. He felt almost embarrassed to be here. He ordered his communications officer to open a channel. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to a human female. She had brown hair tied back from her face and calm brown eyes. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations or medals. Her name, according to the data scrolling beside her image, was Grace Palmer. Zethro did not bother with introductions. He informed her that the Volturi Dominion claimed this sector and all territory within 50 light years. He told her that humans had no right to be here. He explained that she had 30 cycles to evacuate every human from the region or face complete annihilation. He expected tears. He expected begging. He expected her to fall to her knees and plead for mercy. Grace Palmer did none of these things. She listened to his words with her head slightly tilted, as if she was genuinely trying to understand his position. When he finished speaking, she nodded slowly and said that she would need to consult with her superiors. She asked if he could perhaps explain the specific boundaries of the territory he was claiming. She inquired about the possibility of arranging a formal meeting to discuss the matter in greater detail. Her voice was steady and polite throughout. Zethro found himself momentarily confused. This was not how conquered species behaved. He had delivered this same ultimatum to dozens of worlds, and the response was always the same: fear, panic, desperate attempts to negotiate from a position of absolute weakness. This woman spoke to him as if they were equals discussing a minor disagreement. He ended the transmission without answering her questions. He told himself that she was simply too stupid to understand the danger she was in. He told himself that her calm was the result of ignorance rather than courage. He told himself many things in that moment, but somewhere deep in his mind, a small seed of doubt had been planted. The 30 cycles passed slowly. Zethro expected the humans to flee. He expected their ships to scatter like frightened animals running from a predator. Instead, they continued with their daily routines. Supply vessels came and went. Workers performed maintenance on the station's exterior. Children played in the observation lounges with views of the stars. It was as if his ultimatum had never been delivered. Grace Palmer sent him 3 messages during this time. Each one was polite and professional. Each one requested dialogue and expressed hope for a peaceful resolution. Each one was ignored. Zethro had no interest in talking. Talking was for those who could not fight. The Velthari did not talk. On the 28th cycle, Zethro received new orders from the High Council. They were tired of waiting. They wanted a demonstration of Dominion power that would echo across the sector. They wanted blood. Zethro smiled when he read the orders. This was what he had been waiting for. He gathered his warriors in the main hangar of the burning Eclipse and addressed them with pride. He told them that they would soon add another victory to their long list of conquests. He told them that the humans would learn what happened to those who defied the Dominion. He told them that their names would be remembered for generations. His warriors roared their approval. They raised their weapons and chanted ancient battle hymns. They were ready to fight. They were ready to kill. They were ready to do what the Velthari had always done. But as Zethro looked out at the human station one final time before giving the order to attack, he noticed something strange. The station's lights were still on. The people inside were still going about their lives. They were not hiding. They were not running. They were simply existing, as if the massive warship hanging in space nearby was nothing more than a passing cloud. He thought about Grace Palmer and her steady voice. He thought about her request for dialogue. He thought about how she had looked at him through the screen without any trace of fear in her eyes. And for just a moment, he wondered if perhaps he had underestimated these creatures. Then the moment passed and he gave the order. The burning eclipse turned toward a small human mining settlement on a moon called Kepler 7b. 2,000 civilians lived there. They had no weapons. They had no soldiers. They had nothing but their lives and their work and each other. Zethral expected an easy victory. He expected the humans to die quickly and quietly. He expected this mission to be nothing more than a footnote in the long history of Velthury conquest. He was wrong.